All right, so if you've been in the AWS world for any amount of time, you know how this goes. Your company starts to grow, and what grows right along with it? Your collection of AWS accounts. It starts with just one, then maybe a few for different teams, and then before you know it, you're juggling dozens. We're going to dive into this because that growth, while it's a great thing, brings a whole new level of challenges.
I mean, seriously, a single account, that's pretty straightforward. But what happens when you scale that up? 10 accounts? 100 accounts? Suddenly, things get complicated. And they get complicated fast. How in the world do you keep track of all the billing? How do you make sure every single team is playing by the same security rules? And how do you stop just duplicating the same setup work over and over again?
And without some kind of central game plan, this is exactly what you get. It's just billing chaos. A tangled web of bills that's almost impossible to sort out. You've got security risks popping up everywhere because policies are all over the place. And different teams are setting up their infrastructure in completely different ways. It's kind of like trying to run a company where every department has its own separate office building with its own set of rules. It just doesn't scale. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to tackle this head on. First, we'll really dig into the multi-account problem. Then we'll introduce the solution, your new AWS headquarters. We'll talk about how to organize your digital company, how to set the rules, and then cover some essential best practices for growth. And finally, we'll see what it looks like to scale everything without all that chaos. Okay, so let's start by looking a little closer at these governance headaches. What's funny is that using multiple accounts is actually an AWS best practice. It's great for creating security boundaries and making it easier to see who's spending what. But, and this is a big but, without some kind of central management, those awesome benefits can quickly flip and become huge burdens. And that brings us to the hero of our story today, AWS Organizations. This is the service that AWS built specifically to solve this exact multi-account problem. The best way to think about it, it's the central headquarters for every single one of your company's AWS accounts. And here it is, the official definition. It's an account management service that lets you bundle up all those separate AWS accounts into one single thing, an organization, that you can then create and manage from one central spot. It's really all about consolidation and taking back control.
Now this really paints the picture, doesn't it? The before and after is just night and day. On the left, you've got that chaos we talked about, but on the right, you see the order. Instead of a mess of bills, you get one unified bill. Instead of patchy security, you get consistent policies that apply everywhere you want them to. It's a total game changer for how you govern your entire cloud setup.
So AWS Organizations basically comes in two flavors. You can start simple with just consolidated billing, and just like it sounds, that rolls up all your costs into a single bill, which is nice. But the real magic happens when you enable all features. This is what unlocks all the advanced stuff, especially the powerful policy controls that we're about to get into. So how does this whole thing actually work? Well, the beauty of AWS Organizations is that it uses a really simple hierarchical structure, and you'll see it kind of mirrors how a real-world company is put together. At the very top of the food chain, you have the management account. Think of this as the CEO's office for your AWS world. This is the account that created the whole organization. It's the one that pays all the bills, and this part is super important. It has the final say. The rules that you apply to everyone else, they don't apply here. Then you have your member accounts. These are all the other standard AWS accounts that you invite to join your organization. You can think of these as your individual departments or your project teams. They're the ones doing the actual day-to-day work, holding all of your applications and resources. So how do you group all these accounts together logically? Well, that's where organizational units, or OUs, come in. An OU is really just a folder, a container for your accounts. You could create an OU for all your production accounts, another one for your security tools, and maybe another for all the dev teams. This becomes your main tool for applying rules to whole groups of accounts all at once. And here's a great little visual of that structure. At the very top, you've got the root, which is like the whole company. Your management account always lives there. And then underneath, you can create these OUs, like production and security. And check this out, you can even nest OUs inside of other OUs, like putting this main app OU inside the bigger production one. This lets you build out a really logical structure that perfectly matches how you want to manage everything. Okay, so we've got our structure. Now it's time for the fun part, setting the rules. This is where that all features mode really shines, and it's all thanks to something called Service Control Policies, or SCPs. So what are SCPs? Think of them as company-wide security guardrails. They don't actually give anyone permission to do anything. Instead, what they do is define the absolute maximum permissions that are allowed for any account they're attached to. They are literally setting the boundaries for what's possible in your organization.
Now, this is so important. And honestly, it's where a lot of people get tripped up at first. SCPs never grant permissions. I'm going to say that again. They do not grant permissions. Think of them as a filter. They only say what's allowed or what's denied from a very high level. To actually do something, a user still needs their normal permissions from a service called IAM, or Identity and Access Management. Let's use an analogy to make this crystal clear. An IAM policy, that's like giving someone the keys to a car. It says, yep, you can drive. But the SCP, that's like putting up a giant invisible fence around the entire city. It says, this car is never allowed to leave these city limits. So even if you have the keys, your IAM permission, that city boundary, the SCP, still applies. For any action to work, it has to be allowed by both IAM and the SCP. And putting this into action is just incredibly powerful. Let's say you create a policy to deny anyone from turning off your critical security logs. You just write that one policy, you attach it to your production OU, and boom, instantly, every single account inside that OU, now and in the future, inherits that rule. And nobody, not even the root user of those accounts, can break it. Okay, this all sounds amazing in theory, right? But how do you actually set it up in the real world for long-term success? Let's go over a few key best practices that come straight from AWS on how to build a really strong foundation. So, first things first, you've got to lock down that management account. Use a group email for it so it's not tied to one person who might leave, and always use multi-factor authentication. Next up, a really big one, keep your actual workloads out of the management account. Its job is governance, not running your apps. And here's a pro tip. Organize your OUs by their function, like security rules or production policies, not by your company's org chart. It makes applying policies way more logical. And finally, simple things like having a clear naming convention for your accounts and using separate accounts for prod versus non-prod, trust me, that will save you so many headaches later on. So let's bring this all home. The whole point here isn't just about managing a bunch of accounts. It's about setting up your company to grow and innovate on AWS without creating one of those chaotic, unmanageable messes we talked about at the beginning. And this quote from AWS Docs really just says it all, doesn't it? When you have a well-designed, multi-account environment that's managed with AWS Organizations, you basically get the best of all worlds. Your teams can move fast and innovate in their own sandboxes, billing becomes simple, and you still get to keep these flexible, really powerful security controls over everything. So as you look at your own AWS footprint, and as it continues to grow, the real question you've got to ask yourself is this: is my setup built for success and for scale? Or is it slowly, maybe without me even realizing it, heading towards chaos? With a tool like AWS Organizations, you really have the blueprint to start building for success right from day one.